Live from San Francisco on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, you are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with your hosts, Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Let's get it on!
How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here on Wrestling Observer Live. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, noon Pacific 3 Eastern, Sundays 3 Pacific 6 Eastern, and yes, Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Pacific 1 Eastern with Jim Valley. He joins us as always in studio here on Friday. Mike Sempervive joining us after the break. And Jim, what are you wearing today?
Well, you know, the latest edition, the latest episode of Pacific Rim with Fumi Saito and myself, that it's on WrestlingObserver.com for subscribers. We talk about all of the restaurants that wrestlers own in Japan that you can go see if you're going to Tokyo Dome for Wrestle Kingdom. And this is a T-shirt from my personal recommendation, Killer Khan's Restaurant.
Wow, Killer Khan's Restaurant.
Is this not a good-looking shirt?
That's a nice-looking shirt.
That's a good look. Everyone can see it from the video. Everyone goes to Ribera Steakhouse. Because it's so famous, it's not impressive physically. It's about the size of this room we're in right now. And people walk away a little bit disappointed, I think, because of expectation. It's not bad. It's just, I think people...
The Ribera Steakhouse is the size of this room?
It's tiny.
Wow.
And so I think you're going to have a better experience. Killer Khan's going to be there. The food is excellent. The merch, as you can see, is great. Big fan. And you can listen to all the restaurants. Kabuki has a restaurant. Yamada has a restaurant. There's a whole bunch of them. And we list them all and kind of give them ratings in the latest episode of Pacific Rim.
Only at WrestlingObserver.com. Hey, we got a lot to get into here today with Jim Valley and Mike. The top story, obviously, what's going on with CM Punk. We'll open with that when we come back from the break. We've also got NXT ratings on the USA Network. We have got WWE announcing next week more programming. They're doing an NXT pre-show. So if you don't get enough WWE, there's a pre-show on the network coming up next week. We got more matches announced for the Raw season premiere. Obviously, the idea is they want to blow this Raw up because then they're going to be promoting the Wednesday shows. So they've got to use Raw to build up the Wednesday show and the Friday move to Fox. So we'll talk about all of that today and so much more. Back in a moment. Observer Live.
To the people who thought I was gon' flop, y'all a part of the reason I ain't gon' stop. Against the odds, I went hard until I popped. Came from the bottom and now I'm standing on top. I had dreams and now they all coming true.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
Back on the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, Jim Valley. We're all here today on Friday, as we normally are, and a lot of news to get into. And we're going to start with this. This from the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, available exclusively at WrestlingObserver.com. The issue that came out yesterday. If CM Punk is to come back to pro wrestling, it looks like it will be here, that meaning WWE. He was very political in his speech at the last StarCast, talking about how he's grown up, doesn't have animosity towards WWE, and said that if they were to call, he would listen. We'd already reported that Punk's rep had gone to Fox to try and push him to be the co-host of the FS1 talk show, but WWE wasn't interested in him for that, even though he'd probably be good at it. Really, him doing that show would only make sense if he's going to come back to wrestle, because the minute he's on a WWE broadcast, the people will want him to wrestle again. So hiring him to host the show would immediately make the show about him rather than the news. It's basically the feeling that even though WWE went after him hard with the lawsuit that cost him a ton of money, 7 figures, WWE is the place he feels he can make the most money. Given he's about to turn 41 next month, and main eventers are making, for the most part, more now than they were during Punk's heyday, and the age makes the clock tick about how long your window to make that money is, you can see the mentality. Punk did make a lot of money as a babyface in his last few years because his T-shirts were huge, did well as champion, as a heel, although he did not once say he made a lot less money because when he turned, his merch sales went away. Plus, he's seen more guys on the roster that are being allowed to work fewer dates. The impression from WWE is that they believe he wants back in, but right now, it's nothing they are counting on doing. He did get an opening offer from AEW some time back, but then made himself scarce and was negative to them in that Mark Raimondi interview, and as best we can tell, there has been no contact since. What does this mean? Well, I guess we'll find out. As we talked about yesterday, this Fox show is a Fox show. It's not a WWE show. And so, conceivably, Fox could hire CM Punk to do this show, and WWE would not necessarily have, they would have a say in it, but it's very much like WWE 2K, where the video game company, they choose the cover star of the video game. And several times, they have chosen a cover star that WWE did not want to have anything to do with. Warrior being a prime example, Sting, and at the end of the day, when they did that, those guys ended up coming back to WWE. So, we'll see what this means for CM Punk. God only knows. He could show up at AEW Wednesday. He could show up on that Fox show. He's waited until the right time to make his move, and that is today, this week. So we'll see what happens. Jim, what do you make of this? We'll start with you.
If Punk doesn't show up this week, so much focus is put on October 2nd and this upcoming week, and we're going to see a lot happen this week. We had Joe Koff on just a couple of days ago. He mentioned that since its inception, Ring of Honor has produced 480 hours of wrestling content. Today we call that a slow week. But I think that Punk, to really maximize, once this newness wears off and the momentum wears down, somebody is going to need something to bring that excitement level back up. That thing could very easily be CM Punk.
What do you make of this, Mike?
So I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so I'm trying to process this now. So this sounds like a decision on Punk's end. It's being at least written like it's about more about money than anything else.
I don't know what it's about.
Okay, because the way that was read, it was like, well, it seems to me that's where he could make the most money, which would seem to be the most important thing. Then that would be a very important thing, and I think of what Les Thatcher says about, we're all whores. It's just a matter of establishing price. And this is a nice buffer if it happens because, you have Fox in the middle. If he's employed by Fox on this show and still talking about WWE and doing so in a positive light, certainly not a investigative style, that's a nice way to maybe kind of ease him back in. But I am very surprised that, especially with the options that we have, especially with the reverence that he would get from his fan base and from other people, that he would consider this. He not only lost a lot of money in a lawsuit, he lost a friend, and I don't know if this necessarily, he's got anything to prove to them and vice versa. I don't think they necessarily need each other, even though, as Jim said, WWE is certainly going to need the spark as well as AEW once things kind of, ease off for a little bit. We are going to need some surprises, maybe some people to show up when contracts run out and things like that. It's just a natural thing that's going to be able to spark things. And, him almost sitting out for longer, to me, would actually make him more valuable as we see the direction that things go and as we go into the new year. So I got to be honest, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So, again, I haven't really processed it, but I am surprised by that, and I will certainly lose $100, I'm sure, Brian, as you will to others as well, for saying that I never thought I'd see CM Punk and WWE back in good graces with each other to this type of level.
Well, it depends on the story. If Fox is hiring him to do that show because they are in charge of that show, then he's not going back to WWE at this point. He would be a Fox employee. He would be a non-WWE guy,
but Brian,
doing a WWE show.
But that's it. As we talked about that show yesterday, this is not going to be, he's going to be the anchor as a ESPN anchor would be a Bob Lee or somebody like that sitting there on the set of news talking about WWE. It's probably going to be a WWE, obviously a lighter show, more of a promotional vehicle, something where he can talk to Chicago Blackhawks players that love the WWE and things like that. I mean, it would be a natural thing that way. And to be honest, I never even thought they would get to that point. So, again, even though he'd be working for Fox, he would still actually have to be, again, in good graces with WWE, and they would have to be good with this. Now, I guess we'll have to see what happens. But, I'm very surprised with all this.
Well, we'll see about that. Like I mentioned, 2K made decisions that WWE was not cool with. That was what was in their contract. They get to choose who the cover guy is.
Here's the thing. Phil Brooks, the person, and CM Punk, the character, have created a public image of being anti-corporate, of being anti-WWE. He did it in storylines, and he did it in real life. If he goes back, does that harm some of his image to that fan base that really likes him, to stick it to, not Becky Lynch, but stick it to the man?
Jim, how would it not? And Jim and Brian and everybody else out there, on God's green earth, how would it actually not, especially when you have the type of options where you could do a hybrid of working with ROH and New Japan. You could do all New Japan. You could do all AEW. You can do AEW and 0-1. Whatever you wanted to do, you have such options now where you don't have to, quote, work for the man, even though you're probably working for another version of the man, but again, a more palatable version to some people that have been backing him for so long. It's difficult for me to believe that it actually won't do some damage to some of his base.
If he comes back, is CM Punk going to be seen as a sellout?
Of course. Kidding me? People are already talking about that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't...
Now, will he care about that? Probably not, because I'll say this about him mentally is I'm sure he can put blinders on just fine for anything. That I'll give him absolute credit for.
I don't think there is any chance of this happening whatsoever, but I must ask the question, and that is, if this is a Fox production, which it is, and Fox gets to hire whoever they want to be on the show, which they can, I mean, is it possible that Punk could sign with AEW as a wrestler and do the Fox WWE backstage show? Is that possible?
I don't know. I'll let Jim hit that from a media point of view.
I guess in theory it's possible, but I would imagine that there's probably going to be exclusivity clauses in either contract he signs, and if there's not, I would also imagine that WWE would probably put the kibosh on it.
I think that would be the greatest story in wrestling history if that happened, to be honest with you.
It would, in a way, yeah.
All right, let's go to the phones.
If he can pull that off, actually, yes, great.
You're on the air. What's up? This better be good, Ryan.
Dave was comparing him to a character in the movies. What character do you think he is? I think Venom and Freddy Krueger.
Sure, exactly. Thank you very much for the call. Talking about Bray Wyatt here. Are you kidding me? We got big news here today on the show. Back in a moment to talk more about CM Punk. We got NXT ratings. What did you think of the NXT show this week? And more. Wrestling Observer Live.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, Jim Valley joining us. I want to make mention of something here very quickly on the CM Punk story. And that is that, according to the Observer, they have met before, Fox and CM Punk, and it was at least a week ago. And WWE already announced a couple of days ago that the hosts for the show are Booker T and Renee Young. This does not mean that CM Punk can't be hired and work on the show, but the show isn't debuting for 5 more weeks. And so it is possible that Punk was in negotiations and it's not happening. And that's why they made the announcement 5 weeks in advance that Renee and Booker T are hosting the show. They didn't have to make that announcement now. I mean, there's tons of announcements they're making for next week that they're just now making, like, this week. So it's not like they've never announced something at the very last minute. This is 5 weeks in advance. So we shall see what happens, but that's
So all of this could be nothing.
Well, I mean, he met with them about taking the job, so that is something. But he may not get the job. He may not
Punk,
end up
listen to me.
doing any of
hockey.
this.
I want hockey for CM Punk. I need him to cover hockey.
I'm not talking hockey on the WWE show.
Else.
Get out of here. Come on.
No, not there anywhere.
All right, so NXT, week 2. It was all right. 1.006 million viewers.
It's about what I expected.
They stayed above 1 million.
TNA.
The show dropped 26% in the 18 to 49 demo, down to 8th place. The viewership was down 15%. So the audience drop-off was far greater than it was for Raw, which was only down 3% this week. And SmackDown gained viewers from the previous week. So I saw, first off, yesterday I asked, why is only the second hour on the WWE Network? And everybody explained to me, well, it's because the whole show will be uploaded. I think they said at 8 Eastern or something like that. 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. Well, anyway, as of midnight East Coast time on Friday, I still could not watch the entire show on the WWE Network. It was still only the second hour. So I'm not sure what they're doing in terms. It's probably up there now. I don't know. But I guess the point is, like, if you want to watch this show in its entirety on Thursday, you may be waiting until Friday. So I know that the idea was the NXT replay was going to be on the network on Thursday, but the whole thing was not up on Thursday as of yesterday. Now, if you could always record it. Like, if you really want to watch it, you can record it. I guess I'm going to have to record it on YouTube TV and then watch it the next day. But minor inconvenience yesterday when I was trying to watch the show and couldn't watch the entire thing, but I eventually did. I thought the first hour was very good, and I thought that the second hour, I don't want to say it fell off a cliff, but that second hour just dragged. It was a bunch of matches that they stretched out to get to an hour, multiple rest holds. I was falling asleep during an Oney Lorcan-Danny Burch match, which, let me tell you something, has never happened in my lifetime. So, obviously next week's show is going to be a huge one. This was a show designed to build up next week's show. Not every show is going to be a giant, massive, exciting 2-hour program. But we're going to see what happens with this head-to-head block. I'm going to be fascinated to see AEW's first television show because I have no earthly idea what they're going to do. And we've seen 2 weeks of NXT, so I have a rough idea of what they're going to do. We shall see. What did you think of NXT? We'll start with you, Jim.
I agree with you. They probably could have added maybe like a squash match or some sort of new character in that second hour just to kind of pad time. I think it was kind of surprisingly boring for NXT. Usually everything in NXT is very lean and has a purpose, and it did feel like one of the few times where they added filler. And that was obvious and very odd for NXT. I expected the rating to be about 1 million next week. I think it's going to be about 0.9.
Think it's going to be down next week versus AEW?
I think it'll be down.
Wow.
I think it'll be down a little bit. And it's going to be curious where it is in a few weeks. And if it's down, how many of those Bryan Alvarez predictions that everybody made fun of, everyone criticized you, Bryan, how many of those are going to come true?
I don't know.
Quite a few.
They usually always come true.
Exactly.
Every single one of them.
Yep.
Mike, did you see this show?
I did. And I'll say this, the second hour, it was still better than many syndicated wrestling hours from my youth, so I'll take it.
It's ironic you say that because I watched a syndicated hour from my youth immediately afterwards, and it was much better than that second hour of NXT.
Sure. I'm sure it was, I guess. But look, the miscellaneous bin when it comes to wrestling on TV always seems to be between 1 and 1.4 million viewers. Obviously, Impact being the greatest example of that, of no matter what they did for a long period of time, no matter what was on against them, they could not run off viewers. They were going to get the same rating and same number of total viewers roundabouts constantly, no matter week after week. I'm wondering what the pool, how it's going to grow and what exactly it's going to settle at, because I can't see... I just don't know. The first week obviously is going to be artificially high because everybody's going to be tuning in. But once this thing settles in, I wonder if we're going to be seeing 800,000s and things like that. And I am also wondering, because of the nature of cable TV, sometimes we focus more on the rating than we really shouldn't, because the new shows are going to dominate. And we know that wrestling is going to be...
Uh-oh.
other than mighty shows like, in sports and things like that, and your American Horror Stories and your top-tier shows, wrestling's always going to draw enough total viewers where you can, legitimize having it on. So with that, I think the thing to look at is going to be the demos, because TNT is all about that 18 to, especially, I don't know, playing it towards younger fans who would be online and things like that. So I'm wondering if that demographic is going to be worth far more than any rating, the total viewers in that 18 to 34.
All I know is that I don't expect Triple H to say anything different, but he's certainly not going to come on a conference call and say, I wish it was only an hour, but they're making me go to 2 hours. But what he said was, 2 hours is going to be better because with 1 hour, we always felt rushed. And I realize that's what you have to say, and I realize it's only been 2 weeks, but so far, NXT does not need to be 2 hours. It is better as a 1 hour television show.
I bet you Jim and I could solve that problem. And everybody can who's been an old wrestling fan. 90-minute show, put a half-hour US, you're doing for Fox anyway, mimic that with Scott Stanford and somebody else you're not paying, do a USA one, go 90 minutes, and then have a wrap-up show that ties all the other shows together. Do it that way.
Let's go to the phones. You're on the air. What's going on?
Hey, this is Chris from Brooklyn. I just wanted to say it would be an amazing coup for AEW if they could get Punk, but I do think, if he did come back to WWE, and people would forgive and forget, and if his character was portrayed edgy enough, and if he, kind of went against everything like he usually does, I don't think that people would really hold it against him.
Well, I think to a degree, there's always going to be some people that would call him a sellout, but I think that in general, if he came back and they pushed him as a big star, everybody would forget about it. Just think that's how it would go. I would totally lose some respect for Punk, this person said, if he went back to WWE just for the money. What? If he needs money, if he needs a job, why would you lose respect for the guy for going back and making his money? Am I missing something here?
He lost a lot of money in that lawsuit.
7 figures.
Yeah.
To the company, though. And there's the thing where I think, I got into a conversation with somebody about this, about Mike Bennett, where they fired at me. If you were in his position, would you do what he's doing? And my answer is no. And at some point, everybody's got their own line, their own personal line to draw. And I get that. And believe me, I'm not going to begrudge CM Punk for whatever he does. It's his life. It's his business. I really don't care. But I would be very surprised by it. And again, maybe I hold more of a grudge. Maybe I look at things a little bit more differently. But I can get another job. I can do other things. And sometimes I think a lot of entertainers, and pro wrestlers especially, we saw this with Roddy Piper crying tears out in that HBO Bob Costas or whatever it was years ago, where or it was the Brian Gumbel show where, what am I going to do? What can I do at my age? Get a job? Yeah, actually, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And maybe you can't live as opulently as you want to. Maybe it doesn't give you that rush it should. But you know what? Yeah, actually, you can. And it's not that big of a deal. All athletes have to do it. You're not special. So he's got options. And again, I can see why people would lose some respect for him. But with that said, too, I think like that caller said, or like the person who emailed it or texted in said, it's only going to be a certain amount. And as we go on, obviously more people who are in the WWE universe will cheer on CM Punk than hate him.
This person here says, I'm baffled. The Shane versus Kevin Owens match next week is not an I Quit match. It would fit both out. Well, we're making our current fans happy, and we're going to do something that makes sense in the storyline. It's the Fox debut. It's being pushed on all of these NFL broadcasts and whatever. They're trying to get new eyeballs there. And believe me, new eyeballs turning into Smackdown, it's going to be a car crash, Shane McMahon falling off ladders match is going to attract your casual fans much more than a I Quit match in the middle of the ring. Back in a moment, Observer Live.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, Jim Valley joining us here today. I want to mention, if you go to my Twitter at Bryan Alvarez, I've tweeted out a link to Slam Wrestling. Mark Chetcuddy interviewed me about 100 things WWE fans should know and do before they die. You can read the whole interview up at Slam Wrestling, slam.canoe.com, and then grab your copy at Amazon.com. And if you happen to be local, Seattle area, I will be doing a book signing on Saturday, October 12th, Barnes & Noble in Northgate, just north of Seattle, 2 o'clock p.m. Saturday, October 12th, 2 o'clock p.m., Barnes & Noble in Northgate. Make sure you head out there, grab a book, get it signed, have a chat. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, once again, Saturday, October 12th, Barnes & Noble in Northgate, just outside of Seattle, 2 o'clock p.m., 100 things WWE fans should know and do before they die.
Hey, guys, have either one of you poured out a little liquor today for the death of Rob Garrison?
It's noon.
Who was Tommy in The Karate Kid. Get him a body bag. He passed away.
I did not know that.
Very, very, very sad.
That is
Kai
sad,
in mourning.
actually. All right, let's go to the phones. You're on the air. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Well, I mean, there's nothing great as far as wrestling on national TV right now, including...
There's nothing great on national television as it pertains to pro wrestling? What are you talking about?
Well, dude, like, I like going back and watching stuff with, like, my favorite of all time, Ric Flair. And, like, I was watching that super hot angle with Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff, you know, one of the greatest heels, Eric Bischoff, kissing Ric Flair's wife, suing him.
I didn't think anybody could hit the dispensary harder than producer Rob, but amazingly, Jaime
what's going on, my friend?
This is a troll, right?
Listen, no, he's serious, but I think what you need to understand, Jaime, is when you're talking about national television, you realize you're talking about Sinclair as well as Access Television. These are all national. I mean, There's New Japan, there's Ring of Honor, there's WWE, there's NXT. How can you not find good wrestling? Come on now, Jaime. Give me a buddy. What is this? Troll Day on Observer Live? You're on the air. What's going on?
Oh, hey, Brian.
Hi.
What's up, guys?
What's up?
I normally call in and have something to say about the main roster stuff, and usually it's a little disparaging. I want to mix it up a little bit today. I would like to say something nice about the main roster at WWE.
Excellent. Let's hear it.
Namely, I would like to say that Otis Dozovich is simply amazing.
You're absolutely right.
Cheap heat.
No, he's outstanding.
I was watching it.
Still.
And I was already just to bury whatever was coming up. Sometimes I like fun. All of a sudden, Otis Dozovich shows up. And he doesn't have this singlet on.
Oh, and yes. Listen, I hate to do this, but your phone's horrible. I'm Xing out all the calls the rest of the day. But I will talk about Otis since you brought it up. You know what I love about Otis?
What do you love, Brian?
Otis, I'm watching these 1992 Superstars of Wrestling shows from WWF. And, like, Otis could be on any one of those shows.
Yes.
He would fit right in on a 1992 WWF show.
Are you telling me that Otis isn't Rusty Brooks?
He's a bushwhacker. He's like a bushwhacker.
He's better than both.
And
at that point in their careers for the bushwhacker.
And you take him... You're taking a guy from 92 and you're throwing him on WWF television. And there is nothing about WWE television today that is anything like WWF Superstars of Wrestling in 1992. It's a different everything, okay?
Yes.
But what I love about Otis is if you've been watching WWE as long as we all have, you know about all of Vince McMahon's weird things that he has. He wants you to be tall. He wants you to be good-looking. He wants you to be in shape. And the people who are not tall and good-looking and in shape, generally, they do something to try to hide some of these facts. Not Otis.
No.
Otis is so fat.
Oh.
He's powerfully fat. But don't get me wrong, he is really fat. And he's out there last week, and he's pulling his singlet down to reveal to the world and to Vince McMahon, look at how fat I am. And I love it.
Shakes and weights, baby.
He's so great. Like, he breaks every single rule. But he's so unrepentant about it that I almost think that Vince is ultimately at some point going to really do something with the guy.
His level of comfort on television, for his level of experience and his amount of TV time, is remarkable. I mean,
yes.
you compare his level of comfort to, sadly, Chad Gable's level of comfort earlier this week, and it's night and day. But you're right. Otis is the positive epitome of self-love and comfort in your own skin, and he could be a motivational speaker. I would pay to go see Otis.
You know what it is?
I'd buy his tapes.
It is a comfort. He is totally comfortable in displaying himself as a professional wrestler, which you're not to do in 2019 in WWE. You're supposed to be a sports entertainer, but he's not. He is a professional wrestler. He's unrepentant about it, and I feel that even though Vince doesn't want professional wrestlers anymore, he wants sports entertainers, he's been doing this for so long that I feel that he must have like a begrudging level of respect for Otis being such a professional wrestler. That's what I feel.
It's too bad that WWE doesn't do underdog stories or do them very well, because you could leave Otis where he is doing comedy for right now, and then over time you could do an underdog where he challenges for some title, and then like an underdog like Rudy or something, like a fat Rudy, he could come up and win a championship, and it could really actually be a beautiful moment because everybody loves Otis.
Look, I don't think he's Dusty Rhodes. I don't think you can't make another Dusty Rhodes, or that voyage ain't going to be his. But Jimmy Valiant made a lot of money. Jimmy Valiant was very popular. Jimmy Valiant could go anywhere and be the Boogie Woogie Man, could be handsome, could be the boy from New York City. And at one time, and people don't know this because they see the Crockett stuff later on down the line, but like when you look at his stuff from fighting Ivan Koloff in 81, when he came over in 82, when he came over from Memphis and started that run that we see, that you guys talk about, Brian, on your shows, watching those Saturday nights, like that was such an effective version of Jimmy Valiant, and he was never going to be the world heavyweight champion, but he could be your IC champion, he could be your whatever champion, and he could be involved in feuds that didn't involve belts at all, but still carried emotion because he was such a character, because he was so good at what he was, and because he got people to believe in what he is. And I don't know if he's going to get them to believe them as a tag team, and I don't know if he's going to have to deal with that, because who knows, the way things usually go there, Tucker will be pulled from him, in shorter order anyway. But, if they actually give him, like, kind of let him off his chains and let him go, I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen?
I'm not sure he can get any further off his chain.
But as far as then putting him back onto the chain, hopefully they don't do that, and hopefully they realize they do got something there.
If you go to my Twitter at Bryan Alvarez, I've also retweeted Otis's happy birthday message to Asuka. I have no idea what this is, but it is very Otis Dozovich. So
if you call into this show and you praise Otis, it's like calling out the home team, and you get in the ring. It's so cheap, but it's going to work for Brian every single time.
All right, so we haven't been talking a lot about mixed martial arts, but it is a big story today. Former two-division UFC champion BJ Penn has received his release from the promotion.
Yikes.
Dana White told Yahoo on Thursday Penn will no longer be fighting in the organization that he made his pro debut with back in 2001. White had all but declared his time with the organization was over following an incident in Hawaii that saw Penn involved in a physical altercation in and around a club. White described the scene as sad and added that Penn won't fight again. By the way, when Dana White sees something and says it's sad, that's saying something right there. He was in talks to fight Nick Lentz. Oh, God, thank God that's not happening. And that is it. His last 8 fights, he's gone 0-7-1. Has not picked up a victory since winning a trilogy bout against Hughes at UFC 123 in November of 2010. He had not won in 9 years, and they kept booking him for fights.
Please don't go to Bellator. Please.
Oh, Lord.
No, please.
You know he is.
Nobody wants that. This needs to stop because, I mean, it's funny to talk about losing a bar fight and stuff, but on another level, it's really sad. He's on his way to being requiem for a heavyweight if he's not careful.
Jim, they have. I saw it was the bare knuckle thing. I think it was. Oh God, who were the names? Was it Mighty Mo? And it was somebody. And oh God, Sokadoshu. I can't remember who it was. It was somebody from back in those old Pride days where it's like I can't believe these guys are still going. And when you look at Glory Kickboxing, you see some of the same names that you saw back in the days, and it's like. I mean, it's just amazing. I remember the Takanori Gomi fight. I'm looking back on that. It was 2003, the Rumble on the Rock shows. Remember when those were a thing? And it's amazing. But, I mean, look, they were such a need for stars, and he was such a big star that, in a way, I don't blame them because technically if you're cleared to fight and, you know, your job as a promoter, I guess, is to put those guys out there. So if you have no reason not to prevent them from doing it, then – you know, okay, but I am happy that it's over now with the UFC because it's been a long, long time now. And like Jim's saying, this is not going to get any better, especially when his, you know, out-of-ring activity continues to be this erratic.
Well, I don't know if this is going to happen. I just want to bring up the fact that Bellator is running Honolulu, Hawaii on December 14th.
Bingo.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
Hey, real quick, Brian, I saw a tweet here from Lance on Hawaii, who is the son of Samu, the former head shrinker. Says his dad is out of surgery and the liver transplant went well.
Excellent.
So we want to wish the best to Samu.
That's right. He had a liver transplant today.
Yeah.
Samoan SWAT team, I love that. It was such, you know, it was a down period, but the Doom Samoan SWAT team, Road Warriors, you know, that wasn't a well-booked era at the time. You know, unfortunately, business was very odd for WCW at the time, but man, they were awesome. And as the head shrinkers in WWE too, that is a underrated team. You know, it was a short period of time, but they were an underrated, super fun team. Those guys and the Steiners and Gordy and Williams, you know, slamming each other at top speed. That's always going to be awesome.
This person here says, will AEW have title changes on DQs and countouts to be consistent with the idea that they are presenting wrestling more as a sport? How is that presenting it more as a sport? I mean,
just annoys people.
Sports have rules, right? Doesn't every sport have a rule? All right, they can make up any rule they want. You can have a sport where the title doesn't change hands on a countout or disqualification. I believe they're going to stick with that rule, but I do not think that they will abuse that rule. By the way, you mentioned Joe Koff. There is a Ring of Honor pay-per-view coming up tonight. It is available on...
Who mentioned Joe Koff?
Pay-per-view and... What?
Who mentioned Joe Koff?
Jim Valley, like 10 minutes ago.
Oh, did he? Sorry.
Yeah, where were you at? Oh. Yes, coming up tonight, everybody. If you need more wrestling in your life, if you want to make sure that between now and next Friday, you can watch 19 hours of wrestling, it's your opportunity.
Is that really all there is? Did you count
Actually,
that?
there might be. Well, I can tell you this.
You talking Lucha too?
So listen, there's a 3-hour ROH show tonight.
Okay.
There is CMLL anniversary tomorrow.
How many hours is that? 3? 4?
Oh, probably 4.
Yeah, okay.
UFC tomorrow. Bellator tomorrow. New Japan on Sunday. Actually, tomorrow I think it's New Japan. And then 3 hours of Raw. And 2 hours of NXT. 2 hours of AEW. Hour of NXT UK on Thursdays now. 205 Live on Friday and Smackdown on Friday. Anyone add that up?
That sound is my brain exploding.
Back in a moment, Observer Live.
You are listening to Wrestling Observer Live with Bryan Alvarez and Mike Sempervive on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.
Back on the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also WrestlingObserver.com. Jim Valley here. I want to read one final text message. Why are people complaining about Johnny Gargano versus Shane Thorne? Aren't AEW putting out matches like MJF versus Brandon Cutler? I'm not anti-AEW or anti-NXT, just want to compare these two things. I'll compare them for you. There have been 4 takeovers in 2019. 3 of those were headlined by Johnny Gargano. I believe all 3 of them were 5-star matches. And the other one, he was wrestling Ricochet for the North American title. Now he's facing Shane Thorne. So yes, that's a big step down. I cannot compare that fairly with MJF versus Brandon Cutler on the AEW television show. Jim Valley will be here tomorrow, everybody, at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern, with Jim Valley Presents Wrestling Observer Live. What do we got tomorrow, Jim?
I would imagine we'll talk about Ring of Honor. We'll talk more about CM Punk. And last week I talked about Kenny Omega's comments. We can add to that. And also I thought that something that was talked about this week that I talked about on Saturday, the public relations war and AEW, that came up big this past week. We'll revisit that as well and also take your calls. And you can also tweet me at Jim Valley. That's tomorrow, Wrestling Observer Live.
Excuse me, at Jim Valley?
At Jim Valley.
Wow. Okay, well, that's easy, everybody. I'm at Bryan Alvarez. Jim is at Jim Valley. And Mike is at Sempervive. So tweet us, everyone. Follow us on Twitter. Help build up our social media presence, everyone. We're out of time. I want to thank Mike, as always, callers and listeners, everybody in the studio. We'll talk to you again next time, Wrestling Observer Live.